All right, continue to share as you'd like, but I'm going to get us started here. It is 9 o'clock. I want to respect everybody's time. So good morning, good morning. Welcome to the webinar titled Cohort 12 Evaluation Orientation that is being presented by the state's contractor for reporting and evaluation, Allegheny Intermediate Unit. My name is Beth Hoffer, and I am a Youth Development Program Coordinator at the Center for Schools and Communities, and I am your moderator for this session. Michael Passeri is our technical moderator. Before we begin, as we always do, let's take a minute to go over just a few housekeeping details to ensure that the quality of the session is maximized for everyone. You have been muted upon entry to ensure that the quality of the session is maximized. You have been muted upon entry, but participants are encouraged to ask questions, respond to presenter questions, or contribute to the conversations using the chat box and Zoom reactions located in the Zoom bar. A Q&A session is planned at the end of the presentation, but Allegheny IU is asking that if you do have questions during the session, that you are encouraged to put those in the chat, and we will stop and address those questions as time allows. The session is being recorded and will be available in several days on the 21st Century website that I will include in the chat box shortly, if you're not familiar with that website. Also, a PDF of today's presentation will be sent to everyone following the meeting. We will put it in the chat too, but sometimes folks have trouble downloading that. So we will assure that it gets sent out to everyone once the meeting is concluded. So again, our session is being presented by Allegheny Intermediate Unit, and I will turn the microphone over to them to begin.
Thank you so much, Beth. Hi, everyone. I'm Sheila Bell. I'm the Director of Evaluation, Grants, and Data at the Allegheny Intermediate Unit. As you know, we're the state evaluator for the 21C program. With me today is Fallon Weedman and Jesse Thornton, who I know you all work very closely with, and more than me. They do a lot of the TA work with the program evaluation, and we also write the report for the state every year. So we'll be going through all of that today. There we go. So our agenda today is we're just going to give you some background to kind of level set everyone about program evaluation, why this work is important. We know that it's a lot, and thinking about collecting data when you're trying to serve the kiddos is not the first thing on your mind when you get one of these grants all the time, but it is a large piece of what we need to do. So we're going to walk you step by step through data collection. We're going to go through all the different requirements from the federal, state, and local levels for the reporting and analysis piece that we have to do. And we're going to talk a little bit about how you can use your data at the end of the year or during your program as you're trying to improve it over time, because that's really important. It's one of the things we also look at in monitoring. So that's something else we'll discuss. So as I said, we're going to start by thinking about what is program evaluation and how is it structured in these 21C programs that we all have. So this is just something because, it's early, get us moving, get us excited about the data piece. So here's Dilbert, he's talking to his boss, and the boss is just like, oh my gosh, I'll let you read it. But, he doesn't even want to hear anything about it. And, he's covering his ears. That's how a lot of us, I think, feel about data. You get these, it's very excited. You're ready to get your program moving. And then it's like, oh, why do I have to deal with this on top of everything else that I'm doing? But it's so important because it can really help you on your journey as a grantee, and bring in the resources and tools that you need to serve the kids and to modify your program over time slightly, make those adjustments to just make it better and better over the years that you have the grant. So why should you evaluate your program? What are some ideas? Let's just throw a few things in the chat. Why do you think it's important? Anyone think of anything? We've a nice group here. We have 93 participants so far. Does anyone have any thoughts? Oh, great. We got some. So improving the program quality, absolutely. Identifying strengths and weaknesses, that's great. Guiding decisions. Yes, database decision making, making sure it's grounded in what we're seeing and learning. Showcasing the impact of what you're doing. Absolutely. You want to sustain the programs after 21C funding. So that impact piece is so, so important. Legitimizes the work we do while storytelling along the way. I love that. That's such a great way to say it. And I love the idea of storytelling with the data. We do that all the time. And it's so important to bring that qualitative piece in. You know, a lot of what we'll talk about today are the numbers that you have to collect, but the qualitative is super important as well. Evolving as educational environments change. Yes, that's definitely something we're all looking at. Accountability, outcomes. Thank you all. This is wonderful. Preparing to adjust for your program. I think you guys have the hang of it. So you're already, look at you all this morning. You're all into the data realm. You're all on board. Here's our next slide. So everything you said, we have continuous quality improvement. Yes, finding those strengths and weaknesses, addressing it, and adjusting, maximizing services to meet those student needs. So looking at impact and seeing where maybe you have the most impact, how do you maintain that? And also where you want to go and how to bring kids along in another way. Maybe it will help you operate efficiently. You know, maybe you've discovered some things in the data where you can target areas that for improvement that way. We heard about accountability measures in our chat. Absolutely, we have to demonstrate our accountability to our federal funders, our state, and our local. You know, you're working with a lot of partners. Some of you are embedded in LEAs, and you want to show them the value of what you're doing. Future funding opportunities is another reason to do all of this. You want to show that impact and do that storytelling to inform your sustainability. Those things are all very, very important. So great job, everyone. We're really excited that you got so many of those. So data from these evaluations, again, as we just said, they assess your need. You might have think, well, I already did my needs assessment when I wrote my RFP for my C12 grant. Yes, but over time, your needs may shift or change. We've talked about in our chat, changing environments in the education system and the field. So you may have to adjust over time. So you may have to be assessing need as you go. You know, we always use it to improve those programs as that need changes and understand the relationships between cost benefit. Those things are also important. You got a specific amount of money from your grant, and now you want to make sure you're serving all the different individuals and students that you had intended to serve. And, you know, maybe if you have less students coming in, why is that? You know, what changed? What's the need? And what's the cost benefit? So that means it's costing the state more to serve fewer kids because, you know, you have a bigger pot than maybe you thought you were using. So we're looking at that. I know you're looking at that. That's something we look at a lot. We want to replicate what you're doing. You know, you want to make sure that you can maintain it and sustain it, maybe grow it over time if that's a need. And obviously, fulfilling those reporting requirements is really critical. We have very strict deadlines that Jesse and Fallon will be going over with you, and we have to put data into the federal data system, and we have to do that on certain timeframes, and that ensures that Pennsylvania will hopefully continue to get funding for these programs, and you know, showing that we are doing our due diligence as a state to get that information in on time. We just put this up because we think this is important as well. This is the evaluation process, the cycle. You see it's a circle because it's a continuous process. You know, we often define our needs or our questions in our evaluation. We collect a lot of data, which, you know, some of you are in that phase now. You've begun your programs and some of you might not have, but, you know, we're collecting information. And then it will come to Fallon, Jesse, and I. It goes to you in your local evaluator. You will analyze your data. You might be analyzing it as you collect it. And then we do some formal reporting every year. You'll do a local evaluation report, and our 21C annual evaluation report should be out by the end of the month. And we share that information out and inform our stakeholders, including, for you at the local level, that would be people like the caregivers of the students you serve, and, teachers, your LEA, and other partners that you're working with in your community. So I'm going to turn it over to Fallon, who's going to talk to us about how this is defined overall.
Thanks, Sheila. Hi, everyone. My name is Fallon Weedman, and I am one of the program evaluators. You'll probably most likely hear from me when it comes time to begin turning your data in either to us or to the feds. So there are a lot of moving pieces in the 21C evaluation and all the data collection. At the federal level, the U.S. Department of Education asks that we collect GEPRA measures, which are Government Performance and Results Act measures. Those are set by Congress. They seem to update every several years or so. The ones that we've been currently using were established in 2021, and we haven't heard anything about them changing anytime soon. So you can expect to collect this data throughout the life cycle of your grant. The feds also require that each grant be monitored within the first 3 years of its operations. So that is what is set at the federal level. At the state level, there are a couple different measures related to family literacy. And then we also ask that, I believe that grantees are also asked to define some measures at the local level, according to their RFP. So who implements the data collection and how is it collected? At the federal level, the feds contract out with, their own evaluation department, their own version of us, who run the 21 APR data entry website, and that is where you will input all of your federal data. Pennsylvania is currently working on a system that will allow grantees to not have to do this anymore. Your data will integrate, your data that you report to us will integrate seamlessly into the federal system, but this is still being developed. So for the 24-25 data reporting cycle, which will begin in the summertime after the end of this program year, you will be doing your data entry on your own. And when that time comes, when 21 APR opens in the fall, we'll send you some additional guidance around that and some additional training. At the state level, obviously, we, facilitate the data collection. We maintain that 21st century dashboard where you input your monthly attendance and your center's operations and things like that. You'll also send us a student data workbook, which is basically the unique data for each of the kids that you serve. You'll fill out an implementation survey at the end of each year, and then you will also need to collect the teacher survey data and report that to us in the student data workbook, and also in 21 APR at the federal level. For the local evaluation, you will hire an external evaluator to conduct your local evaluation and complete your report. We'll get more into that later. You will also hopefully work with your evaluator to define some local measures, things that you are interested in knowing more about your own grant that are outside of what is required for the state and for the feds, and incorporate that into your report. So this is just an overview of what our role is. I'm not going to read all this to you because I kind of already went over it, but basically we provide training around data collection. We keep you up to date with the different reporting and evaluation requirements. We analyze the monitoring and your student level and grant operations data, and then write an annual report and also create a series of tools to help with your data collection. So this is just more specifics about what exactly the AIU does. Like I said, we, collect that raw grantee data and analyze it by cohort and by summer and school year term. You do report your summer and school year data separately to the feds, but we'll go over that here in a little bit. We just, track report completion for the state. So if you don't turn your data in, you'll receive emails from me. And then if you don't respond to those emails, you will receive emails from your program officer. And then if you don't respond to those, you will receive them from Carmen, and nobody wants that. So please, if I email you, please just respond to it as soon as you can. So, we also provide recommendations to PDE for program improvement based on data results, produce that annual report, which they publish on their website. You're all welcome to read it. Just some light morning reading. Not really, it's 90 pages. But there's some pretty data visualizations in there. It's got colors. And then we also provide some TA and training to you. Okay, so the local evaluator, let's get into this a little bit. So like I said, you're all required to hire a local external evaluator to, conduct your local evaluation. They should be part of your budget, which is, you have 5 to 8% of your budget you can allot to your local evaluation. When you do hire your evaluator, it's always best practice to provide a copy of your RFP to them so that they know what your grant is about and they can help you with, determining data collection, and they can best evaluate your program. Please also share any sort of evaluation deadlines, any website information that they need. You are, we'll talk about this a little bit when we get to 21 APR. So I'll skip over that for now about sharing logins. Please plan to meet with them periodically. It shouldn't just be, hey, you're hired in August, and then you don't talk to them for the rest of the program year and they write a report for you the following December. You should work with your local evaluator throughout the year to make sure everything is going okay, and, they can help you out with some data. And then, make sure all those requirements are met on time. So where can you find a local evaluator if you don't have one? You can reach out to your intermediate unit in your area. Some intermediate units like ours have our own evaluation department. We are not allowed to serve as your local evaluator because it's considered a conflict of interest, but other intermediate units do have data type people that might be able to help or point you in the right direction. You can reach out to higher education partners. A lot of our local evaluators are university professors in public policy or statistics or, education, things like that. The American Evaluation Association, which is kind of like the professional organization for data nerds like us. They do a find an evaluator tool that can help you find people in your area. There's a lot of consultants throughout the state. They don't necessarily need to be in Pennsylvania either. Just recommended because, they have a better idea of what's going on. But there's, different consultants you can hire. Also, can be helpful to reach out to other grantees in your area and see who they use. Just keep in mind that the evaluator cannot be affiliated with or part of the grantee organization. So, if you're a big organization like a YMCA, you can't hire somebody in a different department to be your evaluator. Or you can also not hire another 21st century grantee because that would be a conflict of interest. Okay, so what qualities should you look for in a local evaluator? Somebody who has time to dedicate to your project, who understands the requirements and the timeline, has the capacity to collect and manage data, understands data security needs. This one is especially important. Hackers are getting more and more sophisticated, so, please make sure your evaluator shares with you a data security plan about how they're going to protect your students' information. Somebody who understands the grant. So, you might find a great evaluator who works primarily on National Science Foundation grants. They might not be the best person for evaluating an education grant. Maybe that's not their background. Ability to write useful reports, has related certifications and clearances. Your evaluator does need to have clearances if they are going to be doing anything with your students, like, interviewing them, doing focus groups, things like that, and obviously has evaluation experience. Okay, so at minimum, what should the local evaluator do? They should complete your annual local evaluation report. Their role may vary depending on your needs. Some grantees use their local evaluator to help with federal reporting or help with state reporting. Some grantees use their evaluator just to work on the local evaluation report. Just make sure that you, in your evaluator's contract, you outline what you would like them to do so that there are no surprises on either end. These are just some additional evaluation activities that you can ask your evaluator to do for you. They can help you with developing an evaluation plan and making recommendations for improvement. They can help with data collection, developing data collection tools or helping you with, using our data collection tools that we provide to you. They can conduct site visits, interviews, focus groups. They can help you with data entry, like I said. They can obviously are going to be doing some data reporting. And they can also help you with some technical assistance, trying to understand how to use your data results, and, providing some evaluation TA. And I think I'm going to hand it off, right?
Yeah, we're good. So Fallon had just mentioned the importance of data security. So we're going to just take a moment to talk about that and thinking about data collection as a whole before we dive into what these measures actually are. So why do you guys think it's really important to think about this piece of data collection and security and things? I mean, there's the obvious reasons, but does anyone have just a thought or two we can throw in the chat? Often, sometimes we get projects started and we don't think about the data piece until the end after the project is over. But we think it's really important to think about this from the beginning. That's why we're doing this training, as you're all getting up and running. So just looking at for any ideas. All right, well, in the interest of time, I'll keep moving. But so one of the biggest reasons you really need to think about data collection up front is their data quality. Data quality really matters. Here you see this little conveyor belt, garbage in, garbage out, right? If we don't collect the data right at the beginning, you can't go back and try to recollect it, right? So if you miss collecting attendance for 3 months, you can't really just recreate that. It's gone, right? And you don't want to make things up, or you want to have good quality data. So you want to make sure that your measures are set. You're working with that local evaluator if there's something that you really want to know locally that we don't collect at the state or national level, but you want to gather that information at the right moment and in the right ways. And there's different types of data collection too. We think about your program, you really need to also collect the process of how you're operating. We have that implementation survey that we collect and things like that. If you don't do that, you might see change in your students, but you're not sure, well, what did I do that caused that change? Like, what was the type of programming I was offering over time that really helped with that? And similarly, if you don't collect your outcomes to see how they changed, you might know what you did. I did all this stuff, but I can't really show you how it made a difference because you maybe didn't collect any outcome impact data. You'll collect a lot of data with 21C. I think our problem is a little more that there's so much information, right? But it's still important to think about all that data and find the pieces that are really relevant and important to you in your organization. When you have all those pieces together, you'll have that program evaluation cycle we showed you earlier. This is just a simplified version, but you know what you did, how and then how the participants changed, which is what we want to see. And this is just a little reminder, make everyone hungry for cookies this morning. But little changes in your process can have a big impact on your outcomes, right? So maybe you have a leadership change, or some of the volunteers that are helping to run some of your programming. Maybe you have a change there, someone left that was really impactful or important in that process. You might see changes in the outcomes, right? This is what happens to cookies when you chocolate chip cookies, when you do little tiny things like adding all granulated sugar versus all brown sugar, right? Putting more flour in. I actually have a friend that did this experiment. She wanted to try all these different ways, and yes, the cookies actually, this isn't her slide, obviously, but yeah, it's interesting. Little things make big impacts. So just remember that as you're going. So again, it's really important to have the uniform way to collect the data so that we're all doing it the same way. You'll see that with all the measures we talk about next. We all have to have, they're very, very specific, especially those GIPRA measures and how they want that collected. So it's really important to pay attention. If you don't understand it, you have your local evaluator, you have us. We're happy to help you through that. And then we want to learn and make comparisons. So we do look in our annual report, at how different, grantees compare. We kind of try to look at those trends over time as a state, but we can only do that if you're all collecting similar information. You want to make sure you're collecting the right outcomes. You want to replicate that success. These are all things we talked about, like quality improvement. So I won't belabor it, but those are all good reasons to collect your data and have a plan. This is also very important. So data security, let's just dive into this for a moment. You and your local evaluators should all be familiar with the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, or FERPA. If you're not, we can send you links to that information, but that is how the federal law that lets parents, affords parents the right to have access to their children's education records and the right to seek to have the records amended and to have some control over disclosure of personally identifiable information from their child's information records. So it's really important to know that we're complying with FERPA as 21C. We also want to make sure that we have secure data transmission protocols. So you will get reminders from us over and over, like, please password protect your student data workbooks that come to us in Excel. We don't, you always would you would password it, send it over, and then you send your password in a separate email so we can open it. That's so no one can hack it or, come in there. We also have in our dashboard a very secure password, it's a secure password process. You have to call, that whole process. Some of you have already been through it, where Jesse is helping to change accounts to make sure the right people have access. But those are all things that are really important with the data. Another piece that we want you to think about are data sharing agreements. Those are formal agreements between you and maybe your LEAs or your organizations you're working with that are giving you data that outline your data needs and the timeline for when you need that data. We'll be talking more about that. And also, having release of information forms from your parents that are from the students you're working with. We have templates at the IU for data safeguarding protocols with schools, and we have parent permission forms. So if you need any of those, you can absolutely reach out. So these are just some tips. Again, as you're thinking about data security, definitely plan ahead. If you're within an LEA, you may not need a permission form for your own students at that LEA. However, you might need them if you serve anyone outside of your LEA, right? Make sure you gather that permission. Formal agreements, get those. That's like one of your first steps. Make sure you have those early on. Don't wait till the last minute becomes too difficult. These are talking about what data is needed, who's responsible for providing the data, that they agree to give it to you. And we have that data sharing agreement template linked here. And then protecting your data, again, just making sure that you're monitoring over time who can access your data. Think about where you're storing your data. If you have like paper type data forms or things, is it locked, secure? What about your computers? Do you have a policy to make sure your data on a computer, your staff aren't just leaving it out there? You have passwords on your computers and so forth. Some of that, now is common sense, but for some of you, you may be a smaller nonprofit and this could be tricky. So, I mean, again, work with your local evaluator, work with us if you have any questions. This is just something really important to also think about. So some of these requirements might vary, again, depending on who you serve. So if you're serving public school students, with your data collection, you have to collect PA secure IDs from the LEAs that you're working with.
And this is not.
Oh, sorry. Was there a question? I didn't want to. Okay, maybe not. It's just a mistake. So yes, you have to collect the PA secure IDs from the LEAs, because we at the Allegheny Intermediate Unit, we take the PA secure ID, and that's how we collect PIMS data. So we do get additional data through that from PIMS, but we can't give it back to you. And that's the issue. You need that data so that you can do your local evaluation reports, right? If you're not serving public school students, you're required to collect all the data elements that are in the student data workbook, and we'll be going over that. But, obviously you don't need to collect PA secure IDs. So there is that difference. We wanted to point that out. So think about where you are in that. So why, if you are collecting the secure IDs, we always get this question, well, why do I have to do that? So it helps us match the data to PIMS, and we can bring down data. We have a data sharing agreement as well, from the state. We can pull that data in for the annual analysis, and it leaves you having to report additional elements that we can just get from PIMS. So it hopefully reduces that burden for you, and it allows us to do some more longitudinal analysis as we look at that over time. This comes up a lot too, especially with our newer grantees that are going through this in the first rounds of their first year. So sometimes LEAs might say, well, no, I'm not going to give that to you. A couple things. So there's things you can do. So in the PIMS manual, volume 1, there's page 110. Refer them to that. It says LEAs are encouraged to share this number where appropriate and within FERPA guidelines to ensure accurate data. So we definitely are within that realm, and you can first share that with them. We have the template, which talks about PA secure IDs as part of what is needed. So you can show them that. You can inform them of the requirement as soon as possible. Again, don't wait. This is something that should be like top of your list. Let's get these agreements in place so there's not a big surprise, later in the year when, you're coming to look for data and they're like, well, I didn't know this was part of it. And that can cause problems. You can work with your local evaluator. That may add a level of, credibility. Oh, the data person's getting this. Make sure the data person is part of the data sharing agreement. You want to make sure it's transparent and everyone who has access to it will know about that access. You also have an accountability and reporting guide that you get every year from us that talks about everything we're doing in this training. And we talk about this in there. You can refer them to that. And then again, the state evaluators, as the AIU, you can have them talk to us. And we can bring in your program officer as needed or whoever else if there's a big problem. So I'm going to turn this over to Jesse. He's going to talk to us about data collection and take us through some of the really specific measures.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jesse Thornton, and I'm an evaluation specialist at the Allegheny Intermediate Unit. You will definitely be hearing from me for anything related to the dashboard. I'm sure I've been in contact with a majority of you so far, so nice to meet you all. I'm just going to be covering the type of data you are required to collect as part of your 21st century programming and just some general guidelines when collecting this data. So I have a question to start us off. If you want to chat, you can do that. But what are some ways that you have collected data before? Or even what are some data collection tools that you've thought about doing and you haven't done yet that you'd like to try? Yep. Surveys, definitely a great one. Interviews, yes. That's great. Family engagements, I like that. Focus groups, yes. Oh, yeah. Thank you all for providing a response. Focus groups are your personal favorite. Me too. I'm a big fan of qualitative. Yeah, so chances are you probably have use several of these, and there are many ways you can introduce other methods into your data collection. So interviews and focus groups, for example, can really provide that personal human insight into your programming, while things such as enrollment forms, attendance sheets, and surveys provide a more like concrete, structured information. So this section, we're going to be focusing on what you need to collect and how you will collect it, as well as how to do that in a secure and safe manner. So here is a detailed list of all the data that you will need to collect by the different tiers. So you can see here that the federal data requirements are mandated by the U.S. Department of Education. The state level requirements are mandated by the Pennsylvania Department of Education, and then the local requirements are determined by your program. So you have a little bit more of wiggle room to address your program specific interests that you can use with data. So we will be breaking down each of these requirements, and you are expected to report outcomes data on all students, regardless of the number of days or hours that they've attended programming. Thank you. So first, we will just start with your federal requirements. So all these will be entered into your 21 APR account, which we will go into more detail later in this training. Right. So listed here are tools that we've developed to kind of help you with your data collecting process. These are not required, but more as a supplemental tool to kind of help you when you need it. You're also more than welcome to use your own forms and data collection tools as you see fit, but we sought to provide these for you all, just to kind of ease the burden of the data collection process. So the daily attendance tracker helps track your summer and your school year daily attendance. Your GPA calculator can help calculate your GPA for students who are in grades that do not have GPAs. And then the evaluation workbook allows you to copy and paste data from your student workbook, in which you will receive auto-calculated GEPA results in the format that the 21 APR data is reported on. This also has a GPA calculator built into it if you just want to download that instead of the GPA calculator by itself. So the first federal data requirement we're going to focus on are your activities, your staffing, and your participation data. Here you can see them broken down into their own sections as they'll be reported into the 21 APR system. Each of these three different categories will require some collaboration with your program staff and your local evaluator to kind of determine how you will track and define these measures as you report them. So first, for your activities, you will report each of these two data elements separately for the summer and the school year. So you will report the total number of participants who attended each activity and the total number of hours that each activity was offered. Remember just to count each participant regardless of the amount of time they attended any activity. Okay, so here is a list of all the different categories your programming activities can fall under. There are 15 in total, and you can see here there's some such as parenting skills and family literacy, cultural programs, academic enrichment. We have an accountability guide on our webpage that you all will receive at some point that provides more details on each category and how to crosswalk these various types of activities into the higher level categories that you will report on. So again, you will be working with your program staff and or your local evaluator to develop a plan on how to track your different program activities. If you ever need questions or assistance with tracking your activities, you're always also free to contact us as well for any clarifications or guidance. So when you're reporting on staffing, we are asking for the total number of people who meet both of these following criteria. So first, those who work in a paid or unpaid capacity. So this can include full-time staff, part-time help, volunteers, etc. Second, anyone who provides direct support to the program or who helps with any program activity, even if it is just for a short amount of time. So essentially, if someone contributed in any way to the program, even informally or briefly, they need to be included in this count. So this is also a breakdown of the staff types to track when reporting. So we have administrators, college students, community members, high school students, parents, school day teachers, other non-teaching school staff, subcontract staff, and then other that do not fall into any of these categories. For each of these, you also just want to make sure that you track them separately as either paid staff or as volunteers. Again, tracking your paid and unpaid staff will require you to plan with your program staff and or your local evaluator. Also, again, as with your activities, this is also something that we can help with if you need that guidance. So the last section of the first federal measure is tracking your participation counts. So you will be collecting data on the total number of students enrolled and attended 21C programming by the summer and or school year on these 4 different following characteristics. So we have grade level and hours attended, race and ethnicity, sex, and then unique population specifics. So the first participation category is by the grade level and hours attended. So you will categorize the total number of students by these different grade level categories. So they're categorized by pre-K, kindergarten, and then grades 1 to 12. And additionally, they need to be categorized into these different hour bands that you see. These are hour band categories where we can see almost distinct changes in student outcomes when we do the analysis. 21st century research has shown that around the 90 to 179 hour band mark is where we start to see an increase in positive student outcomes for students in the program. So that is a reason why we have these categorized by these different categories. The next participation category is by the race and ethnicity of students. So we look at 2 different grade level groupings. This is from pre-K to 5th and then from 6th to 12th grade. These race and ethnicity categories are derived from the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights, in which the 21 APR follows guidance from. So you can see here, American Indian or Alaska Native, Asian, Black or African American, Hispanic or Latino, Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander, white, 2 or more races, or there's also an option where if that data was not provided to you. The third participation group is by sex. So this one follows the same grade grouping just as the race and ethnicity category. So from pre-K to 5 and then from 6th to 12th grade. Students are generally reported with the sex that is listed in their student records at the time the data is reported and collected. However, in the case where a student identifies as non-binary or another category that is not on this provided list, you can report the student as not reported and male or female. Okay, and then finally, this category looks at reporting specific population characteristics. Again, it follows the 2 grade groupings that followed with race, ethnicity, and the sex measures. These include students who are English learners, students who are economically disadvantaged, students with disabilities, and then family members of participants in the program. Fallon, did you want to elaborate more on the CEP program logistics and how that influences reporting?
Yeah, for sure. So, as some of you may know, the CEP is the Community Economic Provision, which is a federal program similar to free and reduced lunch, but it allows schools in the country's highest poverty areas to offer free breakfast and lunch to all of their enrolled students rather than having them fill out those household applications and see if they're eligible for free or reduced lunch. So if you are serving a school that falls under the CEP program, you will just you would just categorize all the students as economically disadvantaged from that school. Otherwise, if the student is eligible for free or reduced lunch, you'll categorize them as economically disadvantaged. If anyone has any questions about that, please just feel free to email me or reach out to Watanya, because she has also helped us with defining that.
Oh, would you mind going back one? Actually, I wanted to note something as well. Thank you. So, since some students may be reported in more than one of the following categories, the number of participants doesn't have to equal the number of participants at your respective center. Thank you. So, of the 4 different participation categories we went over, all of them except the number of family members will be tracked in your student data workbook. So, the number of family members will need to be tracked locally. So, just to ensure that you are reporting these participation categories into the student data workbooks. Before I turn it over to Fallon to discuss the federal GEPRA measures, does anyone have any questions so far? Okay, well, all right, thank you. I will turn over to Fallon.
Okay, thank you, Jesse. So we're going to talk about the federal GEPRA measures, which, like I said before, stand for the Government Performance and Results Act. These are set by Congress, and that helps them make decisions about different federal programs. So there are 5 measures in total. They're just kind of laid out here in this table so that you can have, use this for quick reference. So I'm not going to read all this to you. So how are you going to track your GEPRA data? So the GEPRA data is somewhat complex because for many of the measures, you are required to collect the prior and the current year data for that measure so that you can determine whether or not a student improved. So, we recommend that you work with your staff and your local evaluator to develop a plan on how to collect this information. You will collect data for the GEPRAs in the student data workbook. For public school students, like Sheila said, you don't have to manually enter, you don't have to manually enter their student attendance, their behavioral records, their PSSA scores, because we're able to pull all that data from PIMS using the PA Secure ID. I will say that if you turn in a student data workbook without the PA Secure IDs, it will be considered incomplete, and you will be, out of compliance with data reporting until you get those numbers, those ID numbers to us. So please make sure that, you are collecting those IDs because that's the only way that we can, pull that data from PIMS. We can't use the students' names to do that. But like Sheila said, you still need to collect all of the data for the GEPRA measures to complete your own Federal 21 APR reporting and your local evaluation report. We do provide an optional evaluation workbook, and that can be used to auto-calculate the GEPRA measures. This is saved on our website, and there is also a video tutorial of how to use this workbook. Jesse, if you have a second, could you put a link to our website in the chat so that they can explore what we have on there? Okay, so federal GEPRA measure number 1 is related to state assessments. So this is the percentage of students in grades 4 to 8 who participate in 21st century program who demonstrate growth in reading, language arts, or math, on their state assessments. So how is growth determined? So as some of you may know, the PSSAs have a numerical raw score as well as a level, the advanced, proficient, basic, below basic. For the purposes of state and federal reporting, you will use those proficiency levels. So you don't report the numeric score, you'll report the level, the below basic, basic, etc. You will not collect or report data on the Keystone exams or on grade 3 assessments or on PSSA practice tests. Further details are provided in the 21C Accountability Guide. PDE is just, finalizing its approval of the 2025 version of this guide, and once that is done, we will be sending that out to you. Okay, so for collecting your state assessment data, you will not report this data to the state evaluator. So that's Sheila, myself, Jesse. We use the student's PA Secure ID records to pull that data from PIMS. However, you still need to collect the student's PSSA data for 21 APR, the federal reporting system, and for your local evaluation report. So I cannot stress this enough. In order to complete requirements, you have to collect this data. Sometimes grantees get confused because they think that we can send the data to them, but we cannot do that. We're not allowed to. You have to collect it directly from the school district. Next slide, please. So the second measure is the student's grade point average. So this is the percentage of students in grades 7 to 8 and 10 to 12 who attend 21C programming during the school year and or the summer. That means that, if a student attends during the school year, if a student attends during only the summer, if a student attends during both terms, you still have to collect the data. Sometimes this can be kind of confusing because grantees say, well, why am I collecting GPA data for summer-only students? I know I don't make the rules. This is set at the federal level. They want that summer this data for those summer students. So for this measure, you need to collect it. For the measure, it's the percentage of students in grades 7 to 8 and 10 to 12 who attend the program, who had a prior year GPA less than 3.0, and who demonstrated an improved GPA. So that's what the measure says. Go to the next slide.
Alan,
Oh, yeah.
you did have a question. They just want to assure that 9th grade is excluded from this.
Yes, ninth grade is excluded. However, for 10th grade students, you still need to collect their prior year 9th grade GPA so that you can determine whether or not they improved from 9th grade to 10th grade. So we'll get into that here in a second. Okay, so as I was saying, this is how you collect the GPA data. So make sure you collect prior year and current year. So for 2024-2025 data collection, you need the students' 2023-24 GPA and their 2024-25 GPA. When possible, report unweighted GPAs. If a school issues a GPA, it must be used. However, if your school does not issue GPAs and they only issue report card data, the grantee is required to manually calculate that student's GPA. You can do that using the GPA calculator that we provide. You can develop your own calculator. There's free tools online. But you are required to manually calculate GPAs if they're not provided. And then growth is just, a positive 1/10 change or a negative 1/10 change. So there's a question in the chat. If they were in 5th grade and do not have a GPA. Yes, so GPAs are only calculated, the GEPR measure related to GPA is only for students who are currently in, so during 24-25, currently in 7th and 8th grade, or grades 10, 11, and 12. So for 7th graders, that means you will need to collect their 6th grade and their 7th grade GPA. For 8th graders, the 7th and the 8th grade GPA. For 10th graders, the 9th and the 10th. 11th graders, the 10th and the 11th. And then for 12th grade, the 11th and the 12th grade GPA. So it's that prior year and the current year. You need a chart. Yes, there is one provided in the accountability guide, and this is all of the measures are outlined in the student data workbook for data collection. Okay, so what if the student does not have a school issued GPA to collect? Like I said, we do provide a GPA calculator tool to manually calculate the GPA for those students. So you will collect their course grades. You can collect up to 8 courses to use our tool. You must include 4 core content areas: English, math, science, and social studies. You must use the last grading period grades for each year, and you may need to request a student's previous year final grading for comparison. And this is all outlined in more detail within the GPA calculator. And there's also a recorded video tutorial on our website of how to use that calculator. If you ever have any questions about converting student report cards to GPAs, please just reach out to me, and I can help you with that. I will say the calculator only provides calculations for the traditional A to F or 0 to 100 scales. So if you are using a non-traditional grading scale, you can reach out to me and I can help you create a conversion calculation basically. So that was all about GPAs. So GEPRA number 3 is school day attendance. So this is the percentage of students in grades 1 to 12 who participated in the program during the school year who had a school day attendance rate at or below 90% in the prior year and demonstrated an improved attendance rate in the current school year. Okay, so a little bit of information on how you're going to collect this school day attendance data. You will not report this data to the state evaluator, so you do not report that to us. We pull it from PIMS using the PA Secure ID. However, like I said, you still need to collect and analyze that data locally for your evaluation report and for federal reporting. And you will need to collect this data for non-public students and report that to us and report that in your local evaluation and 21 APR. Oh, can you go back to attendance one more time? I'm sorry. Thank you. One thing I did want to mention for attendance, it specifies that it's only for students who participate during the school year. So you don't need to collect the attendance measure or the attendance data for summer only students for 21 APR. You might still want to for your local evaluation report. We would recommend you do so, but it's not necessary. Okay, so GEPRA number 4. This is the percentage of students in grades 1 to 12 who attended program during the school year and or the summer who experienced a decrease in in-school suspensions compared to the previous year. So for collecting the behavior data, you'll basically just collect the total days of in-school suspensions for each student in grades 1 to 12, collect the prior and the current year, and record their behavior improvement status. I will say that in-school suspensions are a somewhat uncommon disciplinary measure throughout Pennsylvania, so it is very likely that your school does not use these. If your school does not issue in-school suspensions, you are not required to collect any additional data for this measure. When you complete reporting, you'll just say, not applicable, school does not issue in-school suspensions. So how is behavior improvement calculated? Basically, if they had if they had less in-school suspensions, they improved. If they did not need to improve, they had 0 days, then they just, didn't need to improve. No change is the same number of days, and then declined is that they had more in-school suspensions in the current year than the prior year. Okay, so student engagement and learning. So this is the percentage of students in grades 1 to 5, so only grades 1 to 5, attending summer and or school year programming who demonstrated an improvement in teacher-reported engagement and learning. Okay, so this is collected through the annual teacher survey. I sent an email about that, I think it was last week, to all of you about collecting the annual teacher surveys. We'll go into those in more detail here in a little bit. But basically, the student engagement measure is question 8 of that survey, that last question. You'll need to collect one for every student in grades 1 to 5 who participated in the summer and or the school year. So again, like the GPA measure, like the PSSA measure, and like the behavior measure, this is for students who attended during the summer only, the summer and the school year, or the school year only. So even if they're summer only kids, you still have to collect it, and you can only collect it from a school day teacher. So this is where grantees get confused. They say, okay, well, it's a summer student. Why am I asking their school year teacher to answer the survey? It's because the feds are interested to know whether students who attended any 21C programming, whether it's summer or school year, have improved on that measure throughout the year. So the theory is that, any dosage of program could have a positive effect on the kid. I will answer that question here in a second. I see there's one in the chat. Of course, you are welcome to collect surveys for other grade levels to use in your local evaluation. There's a note at the bottom that the survey must be collected regardless of how many days the student attended 21C program. That is because at the federal level, we are required to report data on every student, even if they only attend 1 day of programming. Okay, so we're going to get more into administering and reporting the teacher survey data. You must use the provided survey that we sent to all of you. It is also on our website and linked within the accountability guide. You must survey a student's school day classroom teacher. So this means that you need to go survey a teacher that regularly teaches that student throughout the school year. Ideally, it would be a language arts or a math teacher, someone who kind of sees that student all the time. You cannot survey a summer school teacher unless it's also their regular school year teacher. You cannot survey an after-school tutor. You cannot ask a staff member to fill out the survey unless that staff member is their school day teacher. So just to be clear, it has to be the student school day classroom teacher. Just one survey per child. We don't need to do additional pre-post surveying. And please administer those surveys as close to the end of the year as possible. There are some various options for administering the teacher survey. You can administer them via paper and then complete manual data entry. You can email the survey to the teachers and have them send it back to you and then input it into your Excel spreadsheets. You can send an electronic survey using your own survey service like Google Forms or something like that. The AIU, that's us, can host the survey for you and send you their data. But regardless of how the survey is administered, the data from the survey must be entered into the student data workbook after collection. So you don't need to send us your raw survey data. You don't need to send us, a scan of all the paper surveys that you collected. You need to enter that survey data into the student data workbook and send it to us in the fall. So that'll be due November 15th. And then, of course, you will also need to report on that last student engagement measure, question number 8, to the feds, and then your teacher surveys should be also included in your local evaluation report. So you're reporting them in 3 places. 1 is in your student data workbook that goes to us. 2 is just question number 8 that goes to the feds for 21 APR. And 3, the entirety of the survey should be analyzed and included in your local evaluation report. So here are some tips for administering the teacher survey. We know it can be difficult to get the teachers to fill out the survey because they're not offered any sort of incentive to do so. I see a question. Where do you find question number 8? So question 8 is in the teacher survey itself. We sent that out to grantees last week, but I will send a follow-up email with all of that information. Actually, Sheila, if you have a second, or Jesse, I think Jesse lost his cell or his Wi-Fi for a second. Could one of you just put the link to the teacher survey in the chat, please, so that they can download it now?
I'm stuck because I got the screen share.
Oh yeah,
thing.
you have the screen share.
I'll look for it. Is that
sorry.
Was that sent in the email last week?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll
find it.
It's on the website too, isn't it?
Yeah, it's on our website as well.
And I couldn't link our website because of the screen share thing.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you, Beth.
Thank you. Okay, so like I said, you're not allowed to offer any sort of, you can't use 21C funds to pay teachers, offer an incentive to fill out these surveys. So these are just some tips for getting them to do so. Obviously know how to access the classroom teachers. We recommend, for you community-based organizations that, aren't directly involved with the school district, building that relationship with the superintendent or the principal of the school building, making them aware that this is a federal requirement, that you are required to report this data. so that we can, keep getting grant funding. Most teachers and most superintendents and principals are happy to help out if they, understand why this is so important. Give the teachers advance notice. It would be helpful to let them know at the beginning of the year, like, hey, we're offering this program to your school students. We might be reaching out to have you complete a survey, something like that. Reinforce that you're required to complete it, and follow up with any non-responsive teachers. Okay, so those are just some tips for administering the teacher survey. Long story short, they should be administered as close to the end of the year as possible, but you should probably send them out sometime in, now, April, to make sure that they complete it before they all go on summer break. And then for those of you who are C12A, you might not need to collect teacher surveys this year. So if you operated at any time during summer of 2024 or school year 24-25, you're required to collect these this year. If your grant has not started operations yet, then you will not have to collect them. I think I'm handing it back over to someone else.
To me, yes.
Yeah. Okay, Jesse's there.
Yes. Hello. So my power went out, so I'm currently using my personal hotspot. So if I cut in and out, I apologize in advance. But next, we will be going over the data requirements for Pennsylvania. While federal collection looks more at what you accomplished with your program, the state collection focuses a little bit more on what your program looked like that got you to these outcomes. So here's just a brief outline of each of the following types of state data you will need to collect and the tools that you will report this data through. All of your state data will be tracked in either the student data workbook or the 21C dashboard. We have 5 different types of state level data for grantees to report on. So we have parenting skills and involvement, program design, implementation, operations, program participation and attendance, student demographics, and GEPR measures data. Again, it is vital to come up with a data collection plan with your staff and local evaluator to ensure that you're meeting these data collection deadlines, and we're going to be going over each of these individually now. So, thank you. So the first state measure to report on is the parenting skills and family literacy and involvement measures. These will be reported on the implementation survey that are found on the 21C dashboard. We ask you to report whether your program offered any services or programming that focused on these parenting skills or family literacy, and what kind of parent or family events you hosted. So these can include parenting skill classes, open house events, cultural events. We'll have a list that I'll share with you after this. You'll be also asked to report on the total attendance of parents or adult families by each family event offered as well. Next slide. Thank you. So this slide just reiterates the last slide while touching on exactly what you will need to track and collect. When completing the implementation survey, you will check off each type of program that's offered that focuses on the parent and family involvement. And there's 15 categories. I won't go over them all in detail. They will be on the accountability guide, I believe, for you to look at, and they'll also be listed on the implementation survey guide that we will be sending out later this year. Additionally, you'll report on all of the open house events you offered by center, date, and topic. So that's like parent leadership or family literacy. Also reporting on attendance at your different programs and events. So how many adult family members of students participated in at least one activity of any type during that program year. Thank you. Next is your program design, implementation, and operations. So this will be reported on the dashboard, and primary contacts for the dashboard should have received my welcome email that includes this document called Navigating the 21C Dashboard that can help further assist you when reporting on this data and some of the other state measure data yet you'll see. This data helps to answer these following questions. So when does your program operate? where does your program operate? How is the program staffed? What does this program offer? And then who do you partner with? So for this measure, you'll report all this following data. So there's operation start end dates, your hours and days that you've operated, the total hours of programming that you have offered, whether your programming was done in person or a mix of in person and virtual, um, where your programming is located, so all your centers and your location, who is your staff, any professional development offerings that you offer to those staff, the types of activities and content offered, the needs that you are addressing with your program, any partners, collaborators, curriculum models that you use to kind of guide your program, and then any form of participant recruitment, enrollment, and retention strategies. While this does seem overwhelming, a lot of this data will be reported in just about 3 different tools from the dashboard. So you'll be able to check off multiple of these when completing each tool. So like the centers tab in dashboard, that's be where you will report your operation start and end dates, your hours and days of operation, how you delivered your programming, the different locations where you offered programming, etc. So promise you it's not as overwhelming as it looks. Next up is your program participation and attendance data. This will also be tracked on the 21C dashboard as well as student data workbook. While it is optional, we also have the daily attendance tracker that can be a helpful tool for tracking this kind of data. For this measure, we're looking at these following questions. So how many students were served, which schools were served, what did the demographics of your population look like, how often did these students attend, and then did the program meet its targeted accounts as was outlined in your RFP. Again, so yeah, for this measure, you'll just report on this following data. So this is the number of students served in the summer and the school year. This will be on both the dashboard and the workbook. You will list your feeder schools into the dashboard, all the different program attendance levels. So this means the different hour bands that we analyze the outcomes by. This will be on the first tab you see on the student data workbook when you're compiling all the participation counts from your workbook. The number of adult family members served, this will also just be on the dashboard. And then your comparison of your participation and attendance counts compared to the actual counts. This is just to ensure that you're meeting your expected counts outlined in your grant application. This will be technically reported on both your workbook and your dashboard. And then the final state measure to report on will just be your GEPRA measures data. So all this will be reported on your student data workbook. And the workbook has separate tabs for public school and non-public school students, since they'll kind of vary in the data that you'll need to collect depending on their status. Again, just to reiterate, we will ask for the PA secure IDs for public students for us to collect PIMS and GEPRA data for these students. This way you won't have to calculate the GEPRA results yourself just by providing us these IDs. You'll also report their GPA to the nearest 10th using student report cards. This is only required for students in grades 7 to 8 and 10 to 12. If the school does not issue GPAs, again, we have our GPA calculator to kind of help you facilitate that process and kind of reduce that burden. Additionally, we will also receive and retrieve your school day attendance for public schools students by their PA secure IDs. So you will not need to have this data to report yourselves as well. Non-public, however, will need to have their school day attendance entered into the workbook. And this applies for those that are in grades 1 to 12. And this is something that you should communicate with your student schools to retrieve this data if they are non-public. Then there is behavior. So this refers to the total days of in-school suspensions a student has in a given year. Exactly like the attendance data, we will retrieve this from the PA secure IDs that we are provided from Bayou. And non-public students will also have to have this entered manually from the data provided by the school. Again, much like attendance, this also just applies to those in grades 1 to 12. And then finally, the engagement in learning measure refers to question 8 on the teacher survey, which you will manually enter in the workbook regardless of if they are public or non-public. The teacher survey section of the workbook should have a little drop-down list, so you can just click it and then just pick one of the ratings that applies to that student without having to manually type them all in. And then finally, for the data you're required to collect, we'll be looking at the local data requirements. So these aren't as intensive as federal and state, and they also give you a little bit more say in what you want to collect that is unique to your program. So process and outcome measures important to you. You should definitely work with your local evaluator, your staff, and the people you serve to define what success would look like beyond the typical state and federal requirements that you're required to report on. So just a tip is just to make sure to review your original grant application, since it would likely outline your goals or indicators that you can apply to the local evaluation. Some examples of locally defined measures that we've seen include the student and parent satisfaction surveys, academic data such as pre-post assessments, grades, attendance, as well as feedback from staff, administrators, or partners in the form of assessment surveys, or even something qualitative like interviews or focus groups, if you are interested in measuring things in that form. So when setting your GEPRA and state performance measure targets and benchmarks, we want to reiterate the importance of collaborating with your local evaluator staff and community to kind of define what success looks like to you outside of the typical federal and state requirements. So looking at past performance or available trends to ground your targets can be helpful, because you want goals that are realistic and achievable, but still ambitious enough to help grow your program. We also like to consider using the SMART goals to kind of help refine and visualize your goals. And as just a refresher, the SMART goals are specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time bound. So defining your goals as specific as possible, making sure your goals can be trackable and collectible. While your goals are challenging, they are still nonetheless possible, doing only what is capable with the resources you have, and as well as setting clear deadlines that can kind of help you monitor your progress that you're making to reach these goals. So to just wrap up the data collection requirements, we wanted to just note some helpful tips that can make this process easier for you. So first, definitely make it a habit to just collect and enter data as you go instead of letting it pile up. This just keeps your information accurate and manageable, as well as really just reducing the burden that you might have, because we've seen some grantees with over 500 kids, and I imagine doing all that data at once can be pretty overwhelming. And just as a tip, if you enter your data on paper, we recommend entering it on a spreadsheet as well, just to kind of have everything concise and compiled in one easy format and file. Always tracking daily attendance for kids and parents, as well as checking it regularly just to ensure there aren't any gaps or errors in the data. It's also important to document all of the activities you offer, just because reporting your activities in the 21 APR can be extensive. So just make sure to refer to the accountability guide that we have for a complete list of activities. Be sure to communicate with your staff so that they understand what data needs to be collected and why, just to ensure that there's communication around what the evaluator will collect and what you will be responsible for collecting, just to ensure that that process goes a lot more smoothly. And then establishing a data collection schedule and assigning specific people to monitor progress, just because it's very easy to focus on just running your program, which can kind of put the record keeping on the back burner. So by setting up a process and time to periodically check your data, that way just nothing kind of slips through the cracks. Slide. These are just some more tips, including a student data permission form in the program sign-up packet to reduce both the effort for your staff and the parents. We have a pre-filled permission form template on our website that you can download that has just little areas in the text where you can just enter your grantee's name into. Establishing a formal data sharing and collection agreement and schedule with the LEA served by your program. Collect data directly from the school or district. We don't recommend relying on the parents or the students to collect the data just because the schools have an actual official valid source of that data. Plan to collect the state assessment data later than others since it is typically the first data due for your program. So your first deadline for your cohort will be the implementation surveys and the centers data in the dashboard, which will be due in June 15th. And then the federal data will be required sometime in the fall and then the winter. So fall of 2025 and then winter of 2026. And your local data will be required at the end of the year in the form of an evaluation report. So the state data is usually what is due first for grantees. Maintain your information by student ID just to make it easier to link your students across the different multiple data sources, especially because that's how we try to get our PIMS data from you all. And then just the more schools or districts you serve, the more time for data assembly and preparation. That kind of just goes into, collecting the data as you go, just to hopefully reduce that burden for you all. Does anyone have any questions about the data collection requirements? I know it's a lot, but we will be sharing this and we have plenty of resources. So we hope you don't feel overwhelmed by this. Okay, well, if you have a question anytime during this, always feel free to type it in the chat. I believe we are going to take a 5 to 10 minute break.
Yeah, let's do a 5. If we can come back at around 10:30, 10:31, that would be great. We just wanted to give you a chance to stretch. We know it's a lot of information. And then we're going to get into analysis and reporting next. So we'll see you in a few minutes. Thanks. All right, well, welcome back. I hope everyone is here. You had a moment to stretch. So we're going to jump now into analysis and reporting. So we're going to be talking about why the reporting piece is important, where to report it, when, and all those good things, and how to prepare your local evaluation report, which is one of the requirements. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to report, different formats and how you might do that. So there's a lot of different ways you can report your data. Do you guys have any thoughts? Maybe you could throw in chat some ways you plan to report information or ways you've reported data in the past. Any creative things that you've done to talk about data in any way beyond like the formal traditional report, There's just nothing wrong with. Anyone have anything for the chat that or things they want to think about, like ways they might think about sharing their data eventually? Oh, good. Social media. Yes. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, you can reach a lot of your different stakeholders through social media. So website. Yes, it's a great idea. Put it on the website. Annual report. Yep. So some of the more formal, traditional ways of getting the information out there, which is good. Yep. Newsletters. Yes, keeping folks in the loop during your programming year, throwing little pieces of data out in your newsletter. That's great. Other ways you might think about the brochures, e-blasts. Those are all good. So thank you guys for sharing. It's great. So why is it important to share it out? So again, all the things we talked about when we opened the session, we talked about why is it important to evaluate. Well, same reason. That's why reporting is critical. If you're going to improve your program and engage your stakeholders, and remember, stakeholders also include your staff. If you have some really positive outcomes going on and things, letting them know so they see their role and they buy in and they understand, especially if a lot of them are collecting some of the data for you, showing them the results and how important it is for what they're doing could be really key into their buy-in and keeping that data quality at a high standard. You know, reporting also helps us think about, like, we assume a lot of times that, you know, we feel like things are working, or it can crystallize around that. You can see that in action, or sometimes it might show you, well, you might think it feels really great, things are going good, but in reality, maybe the data is telling a little bit of a different story. So it can put you on some of those quality improvement paths, looking at your strengths and some of the areas that you might have a challenge. So who is responsible for the 21C reporting? So this is important. So grantees, you are responsible for the accuracy and completeness of your reports. Some people think, oh, it's my local evaluator, or it's the LEA, or it's this, or no. In the end of the day, you're responsible for reporting the results, 20 to 21 APR, to the AIU for the state, you know, and so forth. So we just want to make sure you understand that. And student counts need to be consistent across your reporting. So, you know, if you're reporting something and the local evaluator is doing their report sort of separately, make sure you have a consistent student list. You know, if you get a student somewhere in the middle of the year, make sure they know that that student exists. So you don't have like mismatches if they're giving you data to enter into 21 APR, but you're looking at your complete list, it's not the same. There could be all kinds of issues. And we've seen that in the past. So just make sure you have some of that consistency there. So we just wanted to give you a few tips for accurate reporting. You know, one, you know, plan. You know, how are you going to have a regular data collection plan, which Jesse talked about? That's really important in your reporting. Where does the reporting fit in that plan? And again, use your local evaluator, work with them to think about that now instead of at the last minute, because then it's, you know, trickier. Especially, you know, a lot of you shared ideas that you have for collecting data for the local level, such as focus groups or, you know, pre and post surveys. Those are things you should plan now if you're going to collect that later. So you have it ready, and then you have that data. You have time to collect it, clean it, analyze it, and then report it. And as part of that plan, keep track of those reporting deadlines. Prepare the data submission well before a deadline. You never want to get an email from us saying, hey, final reminder, deadline's tomorrow for your 21 APR window 1, and you haven't started compiling, right? Don't do that to yourself. We give you a lot of lead time. We'll send reminders out. Just make sure you're looking at it over time, and you know, you're giving yourself enough time to really make sure that it's cleaned and ready to go. You know, some of that checking with the errors, there can be errors in your data. Sometimes we find them after we put them in to the system, the 21 APR system. We might come back to you and say, wait, this didn't add up, or, you know, but we try to be as clean as possible. And then ensure your data are all there and ready when your report deadline comes, you know, in December when that local evaluation report is due. Make sure you had enough time to analyze it. Don't leave yourself just a few weeks. Like, give yourself a good month, a month and a half to really plan it out, lay it out. What do you know, what you need to put in there, and work with your local evaluator on it. So this is just an easy way to remind you of the state deadlines. They shouldn't change year to year. Federal deadlines are subject to change, but they're usually around the same time every year. So you can see we have here the type of reporting that needs to be done and the type of data that you will need to prepare for that reporting. And then we have links here of where you will actually report that information, or where you can get different reporting tools, like there's our EGD website and everything right there. But you see your time frames. So I think Jesse already talked about this a bit too. So your federal staffing, activities, and participation is usually late August to October every year. And then we see window 2 open up usually mid-November through February. You know, so that comes up with your outcomes with your GIPR data. For your state, that's June 15th every year. We collect that, you know, implementation survey in that dashboard, that center operations tab. You can see the link there. to that dashboard to make sure we get all that processed data in. And then in November 15th, we have your student data, the workbooks that we want to make sure that you have password protected in that Excel upload. And we usually do that through email again, or you could do Dropbox, as long as that password is maintained in a separate email so that we can access it. And then every year on December 31st, you have your local evaluation report due. And, knowing that now, think about it's due on the 31st, but there's holidays, right? So sometimes people are off. So if you need to get that in a little sooner, make sure you give yourself that leeway so that you meet the deadline and it's all ready to go and you're prepared. Here's just another way of looking at this. So this is a little Gantt chart that shows the programming years. So remember, programming year 1 for you is summer and school years programming. So that'll go through June of 2025 here. And then year 2 programming comes up in July 1 on 2026. So you can see this is sort of how your data from one year flows into another. And we just wanted to do that visual so you can really see that you're collecting data in one programming year, but you're reporting it in another fiscal or contract year. So this also means that you're going to need to report your data after your grant ends. So let's say you did summer the last year of your grant, but you didn't do that school, you go the whole way through. The next year, you're still going to have to report on teacher surveys and things, right? So make sure you're planning for how you will sustain that data collection after your grant is over. So some of the data results that we're looking at. So again, you've seen this already. These are just where we're putting reporting data. We just have the links here so you can access them quickly and easily, and that template for the local is there as well. That's required by PDE. So just a reminder, like you can customize it. You can make your own graphs, charts, and different things in that local evaluation report, but you have to have the information that's required in there because they do look at that over time. So now I'm going to turn this over to Fallon. We're going to start digging into how you report your data results in 21 APR.
Thanks, Sheila. So like Sheila said, we're gonna, we've gone over, what data you actually need to collect. Now we're just gonna briefly review how you will report all of that. So we've been talking about 21 APR a lot during this session. 21 APR is basically the online federal reporting system that stands for Annual Performance Report. Like Sheila mentioned, there are 2 report periods, your activities, staffing, and participation, and then your GEPRA outcomes. And you report on summer and school year terms separately, and you also report data at the center level. So, if you have 3 centers that operate summer and school year, you need to report your data for summer students at Center A, summer students at Center B, summer students at Center C, and then school year at A, B, and C. So it's kind of like 6, that would be like 6 different reporting pages that you need to fill out. 21 APR isn't set up like the state student grantee workbook or student data workbook where you will report for the entirety of your grant. You have to, disaggregate it for the feds. I will say that with the outcomes window, the way 21 APR is set up, is that the outcomes data tables that you complete are based on the participation data that you entered during window 1. So when the time comes for you to complete federal reporting, please just double check your participation data before you submit it. Every year there are grantees who make errors in their participation entry, and then their outcomes tables are incorrect, and we have to go back and correct that data. And because federal or 21 APR is a federal system, Carmen is the only person allowed to correct participation data after it's submitted. So there's a whole convoluted process to get that done. We try to avoid that as much as possible. So please make sure that you are double checking your data entry before you submit. You know, we're happy to make corrections as needed. You know, we get it, things happen. You know, maybe there was an error in your workbook formula or something and you counted some students under the wrong category. No worries. You know, we just ask that, you know, you do your part and just double check everything before you submit. Next slide, please. Okay, so how do you actually get a 21 APR account? So one person can hold the account for multiple grants within the same grantee. So, you know, if you are a large school district and maybe you have, you know, 3 different 21st century grants, one person can be the login for all of those grants, but you're also allowed to designate separate people for each grant. You know, it's however you want. That said, we ask that you only have one 21 APR user per grant. We are able to grant temporary access, you know, if let's say your program director needs to go on medical leave or something and you need to give access to somebody else, we are able to do that. We just prefer for, you know, keeping things streamlined and efficient and keeping everything organized and knowing who is actually responsible for 21 APR data entry, that there just be one person per grant, except for in extenuating circumstances. Your account holder can either be grant staff or your local evaluator. Allowing local evaluators to be the 21 APR account holder might be changing depending on federal guidance. PDE will update us on that over the summer when they get their updates from 21 APR. So we'll let you know if that changes, but for right now, it's okay that a local evaluator has the account. We do recommend that the account holder be responsible for your data, whomever is responsible for your data entry. Sorry. So like I said, you know, if you're the program director, but you know, you are at a large organization and you know that you're not going to be the person that has the time to complete data entry, you know, please just grant access to whoever is going to be that person, because 21 APR has that you know, dual factor authentication thing going. You'll be taken to login.gov, which is a government website that sort of, you know, filters your login to 21 APR. So long story short, there's no possible way for you to share your login information with anyone, nor are you allowed to per federal guidance. So whoever is responsible for data collection should be the person with the login. To update your 21 APR user, you can do so under the 21C Dashboard's Contact Information tab. When you do that, I'll get an email saying that that person has been updated and I can get their new account set up. Or you are welcome to email me, or you can email Watanya and I. We're the 2 people that have the ability to create accounts in the system. But you don't need to worry about this until fall. So using the 21 APR site, there's the link to the website. Once you are given an account by either myself or Watanya, you will receive an automated activation email from 21 APR. I think it's like 21 APR at the Tactile Group. That's their softwaredeveloper.com or something like that. I forget the exact URL. There's some guidelines you have to read through and, you know, agree to the rules of behavior, basically just saying you're not going to abuse a federal website and you're not going to share this data with people who shouldn't have it, things like that. A bunch of legalese. Your password has to be changed every 60 days. If you get locked out of your account, it will need to be manually reset. You can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so just wanted to reiterate that outcomes data in 21 APR must be reported on all students, regardless of the number of days, hours that they attended. If a student attends 5 hours of program, you are still required to report on that student. Oh, I don't know what happened. Sorry about that, everyone. Some technical difficulties.
Sorry, guys. That was weird. Okay, here it is. Sorry. There it is.
There we go. Like I said, there is no sort of, corrections window or reopening of the system. This is a federal system, so if your data is not entered by the deadline, we cannot enter it later. Carmen can go back in and make corrections to window 1 data during window 2. However, once window 2 closes to us, to the state, we can't go back and enter your data because this is a federal system and we have no control over that. We do give you a deadline earlier than our actual state deadline to allow for any corrections. However, if your data is not completed by the grantee deadline, will be non-compliant with reporting requirements until it is completed. So not to scare you all or anything like that, but the data collection for this grant is very serious. And we have to, do what the feds ask of us to keep our funding. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, I think I'm handing it over, right?
Jesse.
Yes,
Yep.
to me. Yep, thank you, Fallon. So for state reporting, as you can see here, it's the only level where you will use multiple sources to report your findings. These are primarily our 21C dashboard and the student data workbook Excel file. But we will also touch on some of the other not as frequent tools that you'll use for each program year. So hopefully most, if not all of you, have received my dashboard welcome email that should detail your account login, how to change your password, and how the dashboard system works. If you have not received it and you think you should be the primary contact, please reach out to me so I can get that resolved for you as soon as possible, just because some of the data on dashboard is the first deadline for you all with the implementation survey and the center's information on June 15th. But pretty much we're going to do a high level view of what the dashboard and the student data workbook are. So for the dashboard, each grantee will have one staff member who will be able to access the dashboard, and they're referred to as the primary contact. One person is allowed to have access to multiple grants within the same grantee, or grants, each grant can have an individual primary contact as long as it is just one user per grant account. It's a little bit different with in comparison to the federal 21 APR system, where you are allowed, if necessary, to share this login information with other staff, but just be diligent in keeping that login info secure, just because some of this can be pretty sensitive data. But any staff member or local evaluator also may enter data into the student data workbook, but just remember to password protect the file when uploading it, just because it also has pretty sensitive data revolving youth. Next slide, please. Thank you. So these are just some other additional state data reporting tools. All these are submitted to the PDE, so they are not submitted to us. The expenditure report is submitted monthly, while the equipment inventory is submitted annually on October 31st. If you need copies of either of these, please reach out to your assigned program officer and they would be more than happy to provide you with either of these. And then the 21 APR validation form is collected annually once the 21 APR window closes each year. You'll just complete and sign this form and send it to your PD program officer as well. And on our end, we update this form annually and we'll send it out to grantees to complete around the time that the 21 APR window closes. We also wanted to briefly discuss the monitoring process just so that you are aware of it. I know we've touched on it a little bit. Again, this is just more of just a high level view of it because we do offer a separate training for it. It's usually sometime in the fall. But just so you all are aware of it, grantees are monitored at least one time within the first 3 years of their grant. While we facilitate the monitoring process, The actual monitoring itself is conducted by independent external monitors. Um, the monitoring process typically consists of just three main components. So the first is the documentation and compliance review, and then there's interviews with the program stakeholders, and then the actual site visit with your monitor. The monitoring tool for Cohort 12 is currently being updated and waiting to get approval from PDE, but expect most of the process to be the same as we've described it above. Next slide. So this touches more a little bit into the monitoring process. So grantees will have typically 4 to 6 weeks to complete their itinerary and self-assessment report prior to the site visit. And then monitors will then have to complete their own report within 30 days of their site visit monitoring to report any areas of compliance and non-compliance that they saw. If there are instances of non-compliance, they will issue a corrective action plan in which you as the grantee will have 10 days to respond to why these areas may be considered non-compliant. And then unfortunately, grantees are not permitted to reschedule their monitoring dates unless there is an event that physically makes the monitoring impossible. So like if a school closes or if all the staff are out of site due to a conference or a training. So typically we're not allowed to reschedule it for you just because of how compact and busy the monitoring schedule already is. So just keep that in mind. Next slide, please. Thank you. We also want to highlight the most frequent areas of non-compliance that we've seen from prior years, just so these specific items can kind of be on your radar when your monitoring arrives. So these include your sustainability plan, how you share your evaluation findings with your stakeholders, any documentation that shows the time and effort that your staff have put into the program, any documents that outline the open house events and family involvement, as well as any involvement of daytime teachers. And then there's also the policies that you have in place for program attendance, and then as well as any external documents or promotion materials that you make that do not include the 21st Century logo and messaging that includes on it. But notice that all these kind of relate to your data collection process. So we also just want to reiterate that monitoring is kind of another way in which you can improve your program for your students, your family, as well as the communities you serve. And we don't want it to be kind of associated with any type of punishment, but rather just as a form of continuous quality improvement for you all. Next slide. Thank you. Then finally, we will just go over the local evaluation report template that you will use to report your local data for your local evaluation report. So we will provide you with a local evaluation report template that you are required to use. Each section includes headers and tables that you can enter your analysis and your narrative and findings into. It as well as outline what needs to be in each section of the report. However, your local evaluator is more than welcome to make styling and formatting changes to the documents as they see fit, as well as any additional findings you collected at the local level, such as, parent surveys, focus groups, pre-post assessments, things of that sort. Just make sure that all content relevant to the grant is included and listed in the order it appears in the template's outline, just as this allows the PDE to make comparisons across the grant and with the state report more efficiently. We also have on our website, when you receive this, you'll be able to click on that link. It's a local evaluator toolkit that can kind of help guide you throughout the local evaluation component of your program. So it includes things on how to hire a local evaluator, how to use the report template, and create an evaluation plan with your evaluator. So Cohort 12's first local evaluation report will be due on December 31st of this year, and each year following the end of each program or fiscal year. And then you'll want to upload your report to the AIU, and then After we compile them and review them, we send them to PDE to be compiled as well. Next slide. Thank you. So this is just an outline of all the different sections of the local evaluation report template. We want to reiterate that if the report is not written in the required template, we may not accept it based on the severity of the changes in the report. So just keep this in mind and relay it to your local evaluator before beginning your local report. So the first section is your introduction, your program description, and your evaluation design. We've included an introduction for you that describes 21st century and its goals and its functioning. The program description should typically include the overview of your program, things such as your target populations, how you recruited students, things of that sort. And then the evaluation design should actually describe your evaluation and data collection plans. The next section is your findings. So this would include your program design, implementation, and operations, your student family participation and attendance, student outcomes such as the state assessment results and the GPA results, and then any additional stakeholder feedback or case studies, interviews, observations, or site visits. The next section focuses more on your performance indicators and the established GEPRA and state measures. So in the report template, we have tables for each of the 6 measures that you can just fill in with your own data, as well as any additional analysis or narrative that you want to add that you conducted for each measure. And then the final section is your considerations and recommendations for improvement. So this kind of wraps everything up. Here's where you can report any themes that you observed in your findings, and then any reflections and recommendations that your local evaluator has for program improvement, and as well as the evaluation plan or the data improvement. Does anyone have any questions before I turn it over to Sheila? All right. Well, thank you.
Okay, we're almost there. Might end a little early, which is always good. Everyone gets some time back. So now we're going to talk a little bit about using your evaluation findings. So as Jesse mentioned in the monitoring section, one of the areas of non-compliance that we frequently see is that data sharing out, getting that information out there. And we want to talk a little bit about that and creative ways to do data sharing so you can plan. So in a past program or in your current, how have you used data results? How do you currently use them, or how have you used them in the past? You can put this in the chat, like, I don't know, any ideas? What do you do with it? Does it just go on the shelf? It's like, oh, check, I checked that box, I'm done. Oh, great. Parent orientations, teacher professional development, that's great. Newsletters, yes. Thank you, Keisha, that's great. Fundraising, Alan, yeah, fundraising. It's a great way to sustain your program and expand it. Partnership proposals, oh yeah, show them the impact you're making. They want to be part of it. Assessing strengths and need, that's wonderful. How successful, yes, showing others how successful you are. It's wonderful, yes. Thank you. Those are wonderful examples. And yeah, absolutely. All of these ways are ways we would hope you could use these results and the things that you put in your local evaluation report. Continuous improvement. We have social media again, which was mentioned earlier, which is great, keeping people in the loop on the impact that you're making through social media. You can reach so many different target audiences that way. So important. So wonderful. Thank you. So here's some additional ideas. Oh, we also have school board meetings just came over. That's another great place to talk about it. When you're embedded with some LEAs, let them see how important this is, especially, as we think about advocacy for this type of programming and continued funding, having those results out there is really, really important in all those different formats. So yeah, so, you already talked about all of this, like let's look at improvement areas. Let's do quality improvement. Is there anything that we saw a little dip in that we want to address? And how would we do that? Bring in your, stakeholders to help you think about that. Maybe you're writing grants, or, you're just talking to funders about what's going on and getting their input. Maintaining what works. People often think if things aren't constantly going, in a certain direction, that's bad, but sometimes you're doing really good, strong work, and there's, you maintaining that so it doesn't decline is also just as important. So make sure staff see that, even if we didn't have huge gains on PSSA scores, which is really hard, to jump levels in PSSAs, you still maintained, where your students are and how they are improving over time. And it shows them that they're making a big difference in the lives of the kids and families in your community. So again, this is super important. So if you take a note, maybe this is one of those to take away. You have to share your findings with stakeholders. We do monitor that. And that's just something you want to make sure you're aware of and you're planning for. And again, try to make sure it's not last minute. I love some of these ideas in the chat, things like meetings that are going on, or, working with different partners, or going through social media is something you can do throughout the year. You don't always have to wait till the last final report before you talk about how things are going with your grant. This is just a little thing. If the tree falls in the forest and no one is there to hear it, does it make a noise? You just have to remember to disseminate. So get the word out there. So again, here's some creative ways to share things out. And you guys already covered this. If you have advisory committee is another way. Maybe if you have parent meetings or events, you can talk to them about that. These are just little tools that we put in the slide deck. You can take from these, like if you're talking to staff, you want to talk about, we're planning, maybe I'm working with my local evaluator. What are some communicating formats? Maybe we want some things like we're really busy. It's hard to be that interactive with your audiences and your stakeholders. You might want to look at the left side of this slide, like little things like those e-blasts or social media, news media, brochures, executive summaries, different things like that. And then in the middle, you have like going to your meetings, doing some video presentations, or maybe just a few slides. That's wonderful, infographics. And then really interactive is when you might bring in some of your stakeholders and say, let's break this down. Here's our findings. Help us develop recommendations based on the data results. Let's have some discussions with families. Maybe let's do a focus group to really dig into certain areas that we're seeing that we want to know more about. So bringing people in and really involving them and engaging them. And again, it all depends on where you are, your staffing, your time and availability. But at least doing some things on the left hand, it's not that one is better than the other. It's just think about where you are and make sure you think about it as a continuum. When you talk to your program evaluator, see if they can help you, get the word out in different creative ways. It's always good. When you're engaging with your stakeholders around your data, these are really important to think about too. You always want to consider what background the target audience is coming to this with. If they don't have a ton of, we have our annual report that we put on the PDE website, but like Fallon said, it's like 90 pages. We know that that's a specific audience, right? Not everyone is going to sit down and read 90 pages. So we also do a little infographic that summarizes some of the key findings that PDE puts out for us. So think about that as well. The local evaluation report that's due to PDE has a lot of detail in it. Maybe you want to do something that's a one-pager, or you put those things out in the newsletter on social media. You do like a monthly data point or something in an e-blast, something that shows your impact. So think about how much do they really need to know and want to know. Of course, PDE needs to know all these aspects and they want to know it. So we need to have that format for that report, but you might have other formats as well. You know, what are they going to do with that information is important to think about too, because, you know, if you're trying to take action with it, give them some guidance on what the action is that you want to see. You know, what are some of the recommendations? How could they help? Maybe you're trying to engage different community partners, or maybe you're trying to recruit volunteers to help you out with your program. So think about what data would they be interested in that would help them engage with you a little more. When you think about reporting, these are just some more tips. You want to try to develop a core message as you're doing that. So we like to think of it as the what, the so what, and the now what. So the what, you know, what are you talking about? But when you think about your target audience, or think about yourself when you're given a report or information, you have to think about, well, how is this relevant? Why do I care? That's your so what. Like, if you give someone a bunch of stuff, they're like, I don't know, okay, whatever. That's not very good, right? You want them to kind of be engaged with it. And then the now what? What are you looking for? What's the action after it? Again, you know, what can they do to help? So to format what, so what, and now what, so this is an easy way to think about it. Maybe look at just 2 or 3 of your big impact findings that you're really proud of and summarize those in just a few sentences and add 1 data point. You know, you don't have to give them every single thing, every, you know, result on your survey that you did, or, you know, if you have all those GIPRAs, maybe you want to highlight certain ones and talk about it. But if you're trying to do messaging, sometimes just pulling out a few things and gently like conveying those and having those data points there is the most effective when you're doing it. So that brought us through our entire cycle of program evaluation, from defining it, collecting it. We talked about analyzing, reporting, and sharing and informing. So here are some additional resources for you. There's another link to our website in the slide deck, so you have that. And you can navigate to the 21C. There's like a, on the website, there's like, how do you call it? The expanding boxes. So if you click on 21C, it'll expand. It's not like a page anymore. It's more of a thing that goes open. And there's 20 resources linked here for you. These are, it's overwhelming, I get it. But these are also linked in the accountability and reporting guide. And sometimes you're looking for things, you just don't know where they are. We have these here because we want them in multiple places. Maybe you'll remember, oh, hey, that's right, we did that training in April. I know that there were links, I can find it. You know, a lot of this is on our website. Like I said, you could go into the accountability guide. We can always help you if you're having trouble with downloads. But everything we talked about is here, from, you know, the different toolkits, the calculator, the workbooks, permission forms, different templates, some of which are optional. Okay. And as someone just said, they can't get to the links in the PDF that was shared to work. Apologies. Yeah, PDF, sometimes when it converts, it doesn't carry links over. But like I said, these are all located on the website. We have them in the accountability and reporting guide. If you go in there on our website, you'll see these same links. And maybe we can like pull this one slide out of the deck, and as not a PDF, but as a PowerPoint, we can maybe share it. Trying to share the PowerPoint as it is, it's just too large. It won't email. So it's too heavy. But maybe we could do something like that as well.
Sheila, I think the website, and I see, yeah, the website's there. I would encourage the grantees to go to the website, click on that 21st century, just like Sheila said, open that up and you're going to see the various areas and the tools. It's broken down nicely. And one thing that's important to point out, I see number 2 on the slide we're looking at now is the grantee reporting summary. I have a lot of grantees asking me about their due dates. They like to have their due dates on their calendars. There is a summary for 24-25 on the website now too. So I encourage everybody to look for that and put those dates on your calendar. It's important to have those available and noted so that you can meet your required deadlines.
If we send the slide, we can update some of these. We could definitely update the reporting summary. I think we have a new accountability guide as well at some point. So
it's not approved yet. Yeah. But yeah, as soon as it's approved, definitely. And that website is where you'll see all those updated. We also send things out to you as well. So you'll be getting them an email, but it's nice to have them in one place. We think it's hard to, there's a lot of moving parts. We get it. You guys have a lot going on. So, and finally, here is our contact information. You can see our email addresses, phone numbers. If you need us, please, reach out. We're friendly. We like to talk about data. We're here for you. So anytime you have a problem, let us know. We want to open it up to all of you though now. What questions do you have? What information do you need? Oh, please tell.
Real quick, I reconverted the PowerPoint and the links work in the PDF now, so we'll send that to you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, there's like a trick you have to do. I can show it to you in the office next time we're there.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions?
I had a question. And I met you guys at the ELO conference. You guys are awesome. But I had a question about the monitoring, and it could have been because I had stepped out to use the bathroom. The monitoring with like when we send things out like through like newsletters and like all those things, like I've already been to like a couple of board meetings, like things like that. How are those being monitored? Like, should I just save them all in one place? Is there like a folder that I have to upload?
So yeah, what we do is you have evidence that you will submit, and we have a folder structure that you'll be getting when when it's your time to be monitored. And for different questions, you would add different pieces to the folder, like that you want to demonstrate, that you met that requirement, and here's an example. You don't have to put every single thing in there, you want to put a few examples in. How you save that on your end, the more organized you are, knowing that, the easier it is. Like we said, the tool is going to change. That's linked out on our website, so if you want to look at, we're really transparent. We make sure you all have that. So you should know what we're going to look for. Some of the things that are in the tool now will probably move to more of a different format, like a desk audit with your program officer when they visit you. But for some things, all of those pieces, like Jesse said, are still going to have to be accounted for in some way. How we collect it might just look a little different. And we're going to be starting that this summer. So you'll be able to, I'm hoping by fall, it's up to PDE as well, to approve that. We'll have something updated, but yeah, definitely take a look at that, and you could save it somewhere. Like if you want to create a little separate monitoring folder for yourself of things that you're really, proud of, that maybe that would help to have it somewhere in a drive that's quick and easy to grab.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Other questions?
Anybody have anything?
Well, thank you all. We know this is a lot of information, and you might need time to think about it as well. So if you come up with something, you're reviewing this and you're trying to remember, if you're having some trouble, just feel free to reach out. We're here to help. Thank you.
Well, thanks everybody. Don't leave just yet. Be quick. But I want to thank Allegheny IU, Sheila Fallon, and Jesse. They are a very friendly group. If you haven't worked with them, I encourage you to do so. Reach out. They're there to assist, and we really appreciate you taking the time to share this with us today. A reminder to everyone, we will send the updated PDF that Fallon shared out to everyone, so look for it in your inbox. A quick reminder, on May 8th, in the same email that we sent to you about this webinar, there is a fiscal webinar presented by PDE's fiscal team. For Cohort 12A grantees, the program director and individual handling the grant fiscal responsibilities must attend. Cohort 11 and 12 grantees are encouraged to attend as a refresher. So it is a fiscal webinar. Again, 12A grantees, program director, and the individual handling your fiscal responsibilities, you must attend. If you don't have the email that was sent out, reach out to your TA provider and we can send you that information for registration. Please do so. May 8th will be here before you know it. Thanks, everybody. This concludes the session. Thanks for all you do for Pennsylvania students and families, and have a great Tuesday.